Good afternoon. My name is Sheila Lamb, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC Network. For those of you that are not familiar with our organization, the Virginia Small Business Development Center is a partnership program between the U.S. Small Business Administration, George Mason University, and local host institutions throughout Virginia. With 26 locations across the Commonwealth, we provide training and technical assistance to small businesses in their local communities. Our one-on-one advising services are available at no charge. Today's webinar, Franchising 2 Trends, Opportunities, and Obstacles, is presented by the Virginia SBDC Network with FranNet of Virginia and DC. We are recording today's presentation and it will be posted on our website, virginiasbdc.org. Due to the expected large number of participants, everyone's microphone is muted and the chat feature is turned off. But if you have questions during the presentation, you can type those into the Q&A box and we will address them at the end of the session, time permitting. We have also enabled the live transcript function, which you can show or hide via your own meeting controls. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Heather Rosen, President of FranNet of Virginia and DC. Heather is a franchise specialist from longtime SBDC resource partner and the creator of the SBDC's FranFit program, FranNet. Heather began her career as a lawyer, advising businesses on contractual matters and litigation strategy, and then ran marketing and business development teams for large international law firms. In 2009, she left legal services to go into business for herself through a franchise. Now the owner of two franchises, Heather conducts franchise education workshops for the Virginia SBDC and several other organizations. She provides coaching on how to make the transition from employee to entrepreneur and offers guidance to people researching full-time active, semi-passive, or large-scale area development franchise opportunities. Please join me in welcoming Heather Rosen.
Thanks so much, Sheila. And good afternoon, everyone. I am pleased to present this program. We are now in April of 2026, and every time I do this program, it's a little bit different. So if any of you are joining where you've been in previous talks on franchise trends, this is going to sound a little different. As Sheila mentioned, for those who haven't been on one of my webinars before, I am not just a franchise expert and a former lawyer, but I'm also a franchisee myself. I own a consulting franchise and also a travel agency that I started with a partner, with my primary business being consulting. And I'm going to give you my formal knowledge of franchises and what's going on, in addition to my personal observations about the industries. And if you, again, for those who haven't joined one of my webinars before, I work through a company called FranNet, and FranNet is my research arm. And so, when I do my main job, which is talking to people who are going through the process of researching franchises and recommending franchises to research, I am doing so using data and research that FranNet has done so that I can stay on top of what's going on in the industry. This is very much a process of, first and foremost, finding good franchises. And, within our network, we also hear from our colleagues that have clients that are going through the process, clients who have gone into franchises too, what's happening in the industry. And then figuring out which franchises would actually match up with people's requirements. So it's a two-way match, and that is what allows me to give advice freely, literally freely. I never charge anyone for advice, and so I encourage anybody who is going through this process, who is, evaluating different options or trying to figure out whether a franchise would even make sense. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more too, to reach out, because you will never encourage a charge for doing so. So let me take you back to 2021, February of 2021, because February of 2021 was the tail end point of COVID. We were still in COVID. People were still mostly working from home, but a vaccine had come out, and so everybody knew that there was a light at the end of the tunnel, but not everybody had been vaccinated. Not everybody was able to leave home yet. But COVID, really changed the way that people live and work and had a substantial impact on business, including franchises. And I was doing talks throughout COVID on how franchises were adapting. I'm not going to go into that, but there were a lot of things, mostly positive changes that franchises made. But what I'm here to talk about today is opportunities that came out of that and continue to come out of changes in the way we live and the way that we work. Um, but it's important for me to show you the history first because you're going to understand now why things are the way that they are and why there are certain opportunities for business today. So back in February 2021, these were my predictions. And I said, based on what's already happened, here are the opportunities that I saw as business opportunities for people who were going into business. And by the way, you might have been hearing about businesses that were closing. There were plenty of businesses that also opened during COVID. I mean, it was definitely a time where the more bold people, some of them were people who had already opened businesses in the past, but some of them were not. Some of them were people who, had seen their jobs go away or change substantially for the worse during COVID. And they said, enough is enough. I am going to go into business, take control of my future, my destiny, but I want to do it with an experienced franchise supporting me. Um, so plenty of activity then. And what I said the opportunities were going to be then, and spoiler alert, almost all these things happened. I said that franchises that support home construction or just generally people who are spending more time at home, of course, which we were doing during COVID, that was going to be an opportunity. Pet care and pet supply businesses were going to be an opportunity, I said, because so many people had adopted pets during COVID. Childcare, people were having more children because they were spending more time at home. And, when they're young, they need care. When they're a little older, they need education. And there was already starting to be education gaps because of kids learning from home. Not everybody learned working from their home computer through Zoom. And so I said, there were going to be education gaps that could be a business opportunity as well. Personal recovery, a lot of people, I will say myself included, really let ourselves go. We weren't going to the gym, we weren't getting our hair done, our eyebrows done, etc. We weren't taking care of ourselves the way that we did before COVID. So I said, businesses that allowed people to feel better, be better. Actually, there are some healthcare related franchises out there too, and businesses that allowed us to look better because we were going to start getting out into the world again. And those who were looking for a mate were going to start dating again very shortly at this point. So I said businesses that made people, look good and then gave them a place to go and meet up with new friends and potential mates. There was going to be an opportunity for them as well. So that means dining, that means entertainment, and that changed the way, and I said this, that restaurants were going to start offering not just the menu item, but an experience behind it. I said that there was going to be a a greater demand for fundraising businesses because during this time, um, schools and not-for-profits were really not able to raise a lot of money because there was nobody who was interested in going to a special event that you could only get into if you paid money that would go towards the organization's projects. Cleaning businesses, which have been around forever, we're now talking about air cleaning as well. And, in order to get people back into stores and retail, I said, there's going to be a greater demand for visible, deep cleaning businesses. Also, we talked so much about essential businesses. And so I said there's going to be an ongoing focus on this. Retail businesses started to realize during COVID that it's not enough just to have space. You're going to have to actually do some marketing to get people in because during COVID, a lot of businesses suffered because they were relying so much on people walking and driving by and getting foot traffic that way, but they weren't leaving their homes. And so you've got to do more outreach to your customer. And that was also going to and did create an opportunity for more marketing businesses that would actually do that outreach for retail businesses and other businesses. And I said, possibly, more of an interest in outdoor businesses. We all got used to if we were going to do anything socially, it was going to have to be outdoors. A lot of people got more, interested in being outdoors. They liked that experience. More of a focus on smaller spaces. And then I said, I think that COVID is going to make more businesses realize that they better have a contingency plan, a disaster contingency plan, and that they should really, hopefully they have learned that they really can't rely on just one or two customers. I mean, part of the reason some of the businesses didn't make it through COVID is because they really only had one or two customers that they were getting their revenue from. But what happens when the customers have problems and then their business gets impacted as well. Um, and so pretty much everything happened the way I predicted, except for these last two things. I think that there's probably, I'm going to say definitely more of a need for business contingency plans. And, I'm seeing that, there are still businesses that still primarily have one or two customers and they're really vulnerable to their customers' problems. Okay. So what's happened since then, other than all of those things that I predicted coming to fruition? Over the past few years, the funding environment has changed a lot. When I started doing this program shortly after everybody was out in the world, it was very hard to get funding because banks had seen all these businesses go under. And so they were extremely cautious about lending money and the amount of time it took, even for those who should have been easily approved, it was a lot longer because banks were being more cautious. But over the past few years, what's happened, past couple of years, is that interest rates are higher. Loan origination, the SBA loan origination rates are higher. And I mean, retirement fund portfolio values, they've shrunk and then they've gone up. And, even if they recover, it's hard. It's hard to sort of say, I have this much money to put into a business. So because it changes almost on a weekly basis these days. So that's different now. Also, as a result of franchises and other businesses as well, going through all these changes, it triggered a bunch of merger and acquisition and private equity activity. Franchises now have a lot more money and also a lot more sophisticated management teams than they had. A lot of them do. Because there is all this mergers and acquisition and private equity activity, franchises are very attractive to a lot of these companies because they have recurring revenue, which is, by the way, what you also want to look at in your franchise. But because the franchises themselves have recurring revenue from royalty, that triggered a whole series of acquisitions and mergers and private equity. It's still happening, by the way, in the industry. Um, Today, most of the work from home jobs are gone, with very few exceptions. So that is also, I'm going to show you the impact of all of this. Um, so, and most jobs are, I mean, it's a very, Sheila and I were just talking about this. I mean, the job market right now is bad, in almost all sectors. So when people started, going back to work, after and going out in the world, but still a lot of people were working from home, um, there was a renewed interest in, okay, well, maybe I can start a job or start a business while I have a job. Today, that's very, very hard to do because, if you're going into an office, then you can't work on your business while you're in your office. But also, if you're thinking that you're going to, even if you have hybrid job, you're going to devote some of your day to your business, maybe not the best time because the job market is really tight and there is already a lot of scrutiny, on workers to, are you really producing, at the rate that you should be producing? Can we hire somebody who is less expensive than you? Do we need your job at all because of AI? So it's really, really hard, for most people who have a full-time job to start a business, even with the help of a franchise, right now. Um, so the cost of goods and supplies and labor have gone up. That's had an impact, on a lot of businesses. And franchises can usually, even through COVID, when there was supply chain shortages, franchises can substantially help with that. But it's impacted the viability of certain franchises, especially the young ones that didn't really, know how to adapt to that. They don't have the buying power that some of the bigger franchises have too. That, sometimes makes a smaller franchise, a less attractive option. But also the cost of going into business, with a retail business has gone up, shot up substantially. So, well, I'm going to show you the impact of all of these. But people, who want to go into business, some of them are longing to do it. They remember that not so long ago, they had this wonderful time with their kids and they were able to travel and still do work. And so there's still a longing for that. And it's harder now to do that with your job, again, especially with all that scrutiny, that people who are employed, are experiencing. I hear it time and time again from, um, my social circle, about the kind of stress that is happening right now in the workplace. For those who are lucky enough to have a job, it is extremely, stressful to be in a job, the kind of pressure that they're feeling. The flip side of pressure is that as a business owner, there are new customers. There are still stressed out people, there's still unhealthy people, there's still more pets, more kids. That's a new customer for businesses. Um, there is also a greater awareness of climate change. I think we talked about it more during COVID, but still, realistically, we know it's hotter. We know that there's more bugs. We know that there's more property damage from extreme weather events, and that's an opportunity for business. Um, Office buildings, even if people are, in hybrid, jobs, a lot of companies have given up at least some of their space. Office buildings are mostly empty, and some of them are converting, to residences. We see that a lot in DC, that's happening. And, just the impact generally, the customers have changed also because of AI, because of federal cuts. So these are the developments that have come out of those changes that I want you to be aware of. Because again, this is not a doom and gloom webinar. This is about, listen, this is reality. This is what's happening in the world. This is how you might want to think about approaching your decision about which business to go into because of the changes. So, because the funding environment has changed, interest rates are higher, loan origination fees are higher. In the franchise world, some of the franchises are accepting deposits while people apply for their SBA loan. And a lot of people are just foregoing SBA loans. They're trying to see if they can fund their business either through a HELOC, a home equity line of credit, where the interest rate is less and you don't have some of these other fees, or they're trying to see if they can use qualified funds, retirement funds, roll them over into a new retirement fund, like in 401k for your new business, that is specially designed so that it is able to invest in not just the publicly traded stocks, but also stock in your company. This is something that's been around for many years. A lot of people don't know about it, and it's actually a very smart way to fund a business because you don't have these high interest rates. Even if you can get the loan, you don't have to worry about, paying the loan back plus interest. And also you don't have to worry about just making that payment every month to the bank. Every dollar that comes in is yours, which is a really nice way to start a business. And as a result of the mergers and acquisitions, I already told you that there's a lot of money coming in that allows the franchises to invest in some really sophisticated back-end software. But also when there are a bunch of franchises operating under a master kind of umbrella, a franchisor that, has all of these kind of similar franchises, let's say they're all in home services, right? So what that allows you to do if you are part of a younger home services business is you're more sophisticated than you would be if that franchise was just on its own. You get all of the systems of the mature franchises, and you get all of the expertise from the umbrella franchisor. The bottom line is there are some really interesting um, service business, not just service businesses, I shouldn't say. There are some really interesting younger franchises that, because they have all of the tools and institutional knowledge of some older franchises, are really, really sophisticated. And they're still doing some new things. They have the best territory still available. So that's a really positive development in our industry. Um, so as a result of the fact that, there are less people working from home, jobs are harder to find and more demanding, what happened since COVID ended was that there were more franchises that were open to somebody running a business while they had a job. So that's a good thing because they saw that it worked during COVID, and so they said, okay, so I guess we're open to taking on some people who they don't have to quit their job in order to have a business. The problem is you still have to make sure that you have enough time to run them. And this is where you really, want somebody to temper kind of some of the rhetoric that you might hear from a franchise. Yeah, yeah, you can do this while you have a job. You really need to be able to see that your work arrangement is one that other successful people on the franchise have. You want to be more cautious about that and make sure to see if you can find those people and prove that yes, this is not just a successful franchise, but it's also successful for somebody who has a job that's like yours. Okay. And as a result of the costs of labor and cost of supplies going up, cost of real estate going up, franchises can almost always adapt to that. They're actually better at it too, because sometimes independent businesses, some of them are aware, well, you can just pass cost increases on to their customer. But at some point the customer is going to say, wait a minute, I don't really think it's worth it. I'm not sure I'm going to pay these costs. Franchises, the experienced franchises already understand that, and they're focused on not just passing on the cost, but how do we, value add? How do we improve the customer experience so that they feel like they're actually getting more too? Um, and with less people going into an office, you really have to be careful with vending machine businesses. And there's franchises in the space, there's business opportunities in the space. It is still possible to have a successful vending machine business where you buy a machine that's, is kind of like a little mini market. Think of it that way versus vending in, chips and soda, which was always really, really hard to be successful in. People don't realize how hard it is to find a good location for a chip candy soda business, because you're competing against Coke and Pepsi. So you're not going to be chosen for the best spaces. You're going to be, maybe you'll find a B or C space, but it's already hard to find the B or C spaces. It's hard to find the A spaces too, because people are not going into the office in the same numbers as they were before COVID. So there are some franchises that are thinking outside of the box. They're selling things that are it's not just chips, candy, soda. They're selling other things. And that's kind of the, 2.0, 3.0 version of vending machines that could still be successful because you're not competing against Coke and Pepsi, which you didn't want to do anyway. Um, so also recent developments, in terms of the fact that the job market is really weak right now. I'm talking to a lot of people who've lost their jobs. They know cuts are probably coming. Um, there are a few people who are still feeling comfortable. I feel like, federal cuts have already changed a lot of things. I feel like we haven't even seen a tiny bit of what AI is going to do. But the problem is that once you're actually cut or it's coming really soon, how do you replace your income quickly? That's always the problem. The challenge is how do you do that? So in response to that, there are some franchises that will allow converting an individual business. And you might say, well, why don't I just go into a independent individual business? Because a lot of cases you really don't know how to run those businesses, and a lot of those businesses are riddled with problems, and you wouldn't know it because you haven't been in the business before. So the franchises are stepping up in some cases, helping with acquisitions. Actually, in some cases, they're finding acquisition targets of an existing revenue business, and then you've got the franchise behind you, and they'll help you fix. They know where the problems tend to be, and they'll help you fix them. And it's the biggest problem with acquiring an existing business is you don't know what the real reason the owner is selling the business is. They won't tell you. So the franchise knows, though, because they're in the industry, they know what to look out for. They know what's fixable and what's not fixable, and they'll help you find a business where there's probably some problems there too, but they know they're fixable, and they will actually help you fix them. Also, there are a few franchises that are offering health insurance benefits. It's not easy for them to do, but in some cases they figured out a way to do it. I mean, there is an exchange that a lot of business owners, when they are suddenly not employees, oh, what do I do? There is an exchange. I mean, it's through the Affordable Care Act. No matter what you think of that program, it does allow people to easily go on a website and buy affordable health insurance. You still have to pay for it. It's not free, but it's around half the cost of Cobra, which is nice. And there's different choices too. There's plans that cover more versus less, for people who really don't have a lot of money to work with. In terms of new customers, like I said before, more pets, more children. more movers. I think we're about to hit a moving boom because of the fact that because the employment market has changed. People are, leaving and going to places where there is a job, if there isn't a job where they are. They're downsizing. A few people are getting rich too off of the changes and they're upsizing. So it's happening both ways. But if you think about that, a mover as your customer, there's a lot of opportunities that presents. And then we still have people who have health needs, fitness needs, pain. They need weight loss. And even with the GLP-1 weight loss products, you can't just take a GLP-1. And there are franchises that offer services around, some of them even prescribe the GLP-1s, or they'll mix, I don't know exactly how this works, but they have physicians within the franchise system that will actually mix the same formula so that you don't have to um, wait for Wegovy or Ozempic to be available near you because there's been some supply chain issues with that. They can mix the same formula for you and for people who buy that. Um, and then there's a more of a focus, and I think this is a huge opportunity on the 50 plus customer. Franchises get it. Some of the franchises really get it. They are tailoring their marketing materials to the 50 plus, age 50 and above customer. They're not saying they're a 50 plus business, but they are catering to that customer, and people who are 50 plus recognize that. But they're able to serve people who are less than 52. They don't know that they're buying from a 50 plus business in some cases. And with new issues, there's always new issues, new problems to solve. This particular bullet point deals with business problems to solve. So there's been a renewed need and awareness of business coaching needs. And, their businesses are having a lot of problems. Some of them are not going to make it through the current state of the economy. And the smart ones are stepping up and saying, yes, I am open to change. And so business coaching businesses are really interesting. They solve problems. They literally keep businesses afloat by helping them change things so that their customers want to keep buying, that they find new customers, and also so that their employees want to stay. When you are a business and you are, looking very carefully at your employees, putting a lot of pressure on them, that's typically not sustainable. Employees don't stick around too long under those circumstances. And so business coaching businesses are reaching out to companies and saying, listen, let's figure out a way to achieve your goals without driving your employees out the door. Because the cost of recruiting there's a lot of people who are looking for jobs, but the cost of recruiting an employee that could do what your last employee could do it is extremely high. And then still a need for clean air and clean surfaces. And as a result of climate change, heat damage, ice damage, water, wind, and hail, we have seen some more eco-friendly companies that offer a product that does that has been tested and doesn't harm pets. They've been FDA approved. This doesn't harm pets. It doesn't harm the environment. This keeps things out of the landfill. I actually just did not me, actually, my colleague just did a webinar on a green business that keeps things out of landfills, and it does good while helping business owners make money. It's a for-profit business that does this, and I've gotten a lot of inquiries. A lot of people in their 20s and 30s are really interested in this. Maybe people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, et cetera, who went through COVID, maybe they were more aware of climate change and they, cared a lot more because of supply chain shortages. We remember we couldn't get toilet paper and napkins. some people have, kind of forgotten about that and not as interested, but the 20s and 30s are still very aware, and very interested in not further harming the environment. But also businesses that repair interiors and exteriors of homes and commercial properties are in extreme need. That is a wonderful opportunity. It is the most recession-proof business out there because, unfortunately, I really don't see a future where we are not going to have extreme weather events. And even outside of weather, there are pipes that burst, there are, fires, there are things that happen inside our house. It's just a normal part of being a homeowner, and these businesses fix that too. They put the devastated homeowner, property owner, back to where they were so that they can, be made whole again. These businesses are wonderful businesses to have for the right person, but just what they do is wonderful. Um, but franchises are also, I think, because of COVID, and because of what they still hear from the franchise candidates that they talk to, they're still trying very hard to offer people more work-life balance, more flexibility, the kind of things that we had during COVID. B2B franchises are almost all of them. No, I shouldn't say that. Many of them can be run from a laptop. Yes, you have to go and get out into your community to meet the other businesses in your community, but otherwise, work gets done from a laptop. Think about the kind of flexibility that gives you to, vacation and work, to visit your adult children and your grandkids and work. It's a really, really nice lifestyle. And it also allows you to work, in your business a lot longer because there's not a lot of, physical activity that you have. I mean, there are people who are running some of these businesses and they've been doing it for years and now they're in their 70s or their 80s and they're still working part-time. Their minds are still young. They still feel like they are, making a difference. They're making money and they're not as, stressed about the stock market crashing because they're still making money. I mean, we're all stressed about that, but they're still making money. And so it's a really nice way to retire without really retiring. And a lot of people are doing it. And B2B franchises with the support of a franchisor can allow them to do that. A lot of franchises too, they have contractors that you can use, or they'll tell you how to find contractors that somebody else manages. They have call center. A lot of the service franchises now have call centers. The franchisor themselves are offering more services now. Sometimes the franchise um, delivers the product or service, and the franchisee just does marketing, nurtures local relationships with, if they have employees, with the employees, but also with the customer, and they handle customer service. But the franchisor, in some cases, handles everything else. So if you're a relationship person and you like developing and maintaining long-term relationships, but you really don't want to actually deliver the product or the service, some of these businesses could be a very nice way to earn a living. Um, some more franchises now than before COVID are allowing franchisees to start with a general manager. There's good and there's bad to this. I mean, it's good that they're open to it. You do need to pay a general manager, so that's an additional expense that you'll have if you go into a traditional owner operator business with a general manager. Don't forget to factor that in. But some people, they already have businesses, or they have a job and they have enough flexibility to be able to manage a general manager. The business isn't going to break even as quickly as if they were working in it, but they want a longer term play. So, for people who say, well, I really want to be out of my field in 3 or 4 years. I don't need to make money from the business. I'd like it to break even in year one or at least in year two. This is a possibility. It's a newer possibility for them because of recent developments, because of COVID, opened franchisors up to that, that weren't open to it before. And I want to say a word about restaurants, food franchises, because this is the area where I get the most questions. Um, you have to be really careful in this space. Yes, everybody eats, true, but you still have that question of where do you put a restaurant these days? Because it used to be you could put one right near an office space and you knew you would have a predictable um, number of customers, but that's not the case anymore because, as I said before, people aren't going into the office the way that they were before. Um, some of the franchises they've opened up a movable model. Usually you still have to have a bricks and mortar model, but some of them have a movable model. The problem with bricks and mortar, as I said before, is the cost. The cost of opening up a restaurant these days, even the smallest footprint restaurant, you're talking about at least a $400,000 investment. So you don't want to make that decision lightly. There are some really interesting movable models right now that might be worth looking into if you're thinking restaurant. The restaurants themselves, because of the higher cost of things, are starting in the franchise space, of course, I'm talking about, are offering more scaled down menu offerings. And I'm talking about the experienced ones. The new ones, newer businesses, sometimes they'll start out by just kind of offering everything under the sun. And then they realize, okay, I have a really high inventory cost right now. I don't necessarily want that. So over time, as they get more experience, they tend to scale down their offerings, and restaurants are included in that. Um, Restaurants are offering more self-service options these days. I noticed recently that the Cheesecake Factory even has a grab and go refrigerator section so that people can show up and go and they don't have to talk to anybody. It could be something that they don't have to wait around for too. So that's happening in restaurants. The restaurants that do have a bricks and mortar offering with seating, they're starting to offer more of an experience. And again, a lot of franchises realize this along the way that in order to get people to come and come back time and time again, because that's what you want. You want your customers to keep showing up. They're starting to offer an experience, not just the food. And as the cost of menu items goes up, they really better offer an experience. And then on the flip side of it, movie theaters are also offering food. So it's still about entertainment plus food is really where you want to be if you're offering one or the other. And then you have to really be careful about food safety. Food safety has always been an issue. Even the most experienced food franchise that's still around is probably McDonald's. Even they have food safety issues. They have E. coli outbreaks. You might not have heard about it recently, but it's still happening. And if you Google it, you will find it. Um, so think about, going into a franchise or independent business that's not as old and experienced as McDonald's. You could make your customer very sick or worse, by serving them tainted food. Um, Even if you follow all of the safety standards laid out by the health department, your suppliers, and regulations are being lifted right now, so you're exposing yourself to even more risk. So you have the contamination issue, you also have the allergy issue. And if your employees are you've got your suppliers that could be selling something that's tainted, and your employees also could inadvertently serve somebody something that puts them in the hospital. So be very, very careful about this category. And if you go into this category, again, I urge you to only work with the most experienced franchises. So where are the opportunities? I've talked about them so already, but let me summarize. Here's my top 10. For those from my generation, we used to watch Dave Letterman. He always had a top 10. Here are the top 10 in franchising right now to really pay attention to if you want to be the savviest of investor in your business. Because when you go into business through a franchise, it's an investment and you're working in the business. Um, but you're investing your money and you're hoping that what you invest in the business is not just going to return some profit, and you'll eventually in not too long a time make some profit, but you're also hoping that it's going to significantly outperform the stock market, because that's the other way that you can invest your money is by putting it into some sort of a brokerage account and invest it in somebody else's company. So as an investor, pay careful attention to these categories that I'm talking about. If you really like the storefront bricks and mortar retail model, think services versus product, because services, as I've said before, there's such a huge opportunity in beauty, fitness, and wellness, and health is part of that too. But also, if you're offering a service, you're able to increase your costs, increase the prices a lot easier than if you're just selling a product. Because your customer, just by having a better experience, is going to be willing to pay more for your service. But it's harder if you're selling a hamburger to increase the cost of a $10 hamburger to a $20 hamburger. Your customer is going to say, what, is this hamburger so significantly different than what I'm buying from, Glory Days or something like that? So be very careful about making sure that you've got a business where you can adjust your pricing when the cost of your products goes up and when the cost of your rent goes up. Services, those that are related to fixing, selling, or improving a home, it's a great place to be because there's a lot of home sales and purchases happening. And that will continue. And especially if you live in a place, there are a lot of places in Virginia where there's military that move in and out on contracts. That will always happen, but I think there's an additional boost right now because people are trying to figure out where they really can afford to live. Um, Also, the franchisees so going into business through a service franchise, for example, or through any franchise where they have similar businesses under that same umbrella, it offers you an additional business expansion opportunity. Because a lot of people, when they go into business, they really only want to buy one license. They're not ready to buy multiple licenses of a franchise, or maybe they found a great franchise and they only have one territory left near them. Some of these franchises that offer similar businesses that are a little bit different, but it's still under the same umbrella. That's how it offers another opportunity to expand when you're ready to expand. So that's a really exciting way to sort of look into the future, or a future possibility with your business without committing by buying a license, or a double license or a triple license today. Okay, B2B franchises, again, portable. A lot of these are portable, and there is an increased demand for some of these businesses. And I'm talking again about coaching. I'm talking about cost reduction businesses. Um, this is what businesses absolutely, they always need it. But in a economy where a lot of businesses are really struggling, they need it more than ever. It's counter-cyclical actually to the economy. Businesses that offer call centers are great because that frees up your time. A lot of franchisors are harnessing AI. So that same phenomenon that is threatening a lot of jobs, it's being used by businesses. A lot of franchisors already know, they already have contracts with companies that offer AI products that actually help their franchisees get more customers. Um, Business, if you've got the capital to do it, a business that can be manager run or general manager run where you can be a semi-absentee owner. Again, sometimes you know that the clouds are on the horizon. You know things are not going well in your industry. It hasn't hit you yet, but you know it's coming. You just don't know when. So there are people who are, putting a little money into extra money into businesses with a general manager running things that they're going to start a business that will be there for when things don't go well in their industry and their job goes away. Or they just know they're retiring. They know that in 3 years or so, they're going to be ready to be out of their industry. It's not something they want to stay in for a lot longer. And so some people with a little extra capital are going into business with a general manager and they're starting a business now. So that's an opportunity. Um, Using retirement funds, like I said, the qualified funds instead of SBA loans that allows people to go into business without having to apply for a loan and pay the very high interest rates through the SBA program right now. Seasonal businesses, this is a there have been businesses that have operated in Virginia where we have a fall, winter, spring, summer, 4 seasons. They have done well just operating during the spring, summer, fall. They didn't operate traditionally during the winter at all because they have an outdoor service offering, and a lot of those businesses have added some offerings during the winter season as well. So that's a good thing. I mean, it's extra money for business owners and it also allows their employees to have something to do so they don't have to rehire every year. They don't have to risk losing employees to other companies. And then just service businesses, with we've been through supply chain shortages during COVID. Hopefully that'll never happen again, but it could, right? So, and then we've got the rise of costs, and then we have the rise of rents over time. Hopefully it'll be, there. I see a future in the not too distant future where some of those rents are going to come down, but it's still going to be very expensive. It's not going to come down drastically. I feel like it's got to come down. It's insanely high. I think the kind of rents that commercial spaces are commanding right now, it's got to get a little weaker, but it's not going to come down to pre-COVID levels anytime. I don't think it's going to ever come down. So see if there's a service business that you can open without having to pay rent to a landlord. It's just a cost. I think there's a big opportunity there. I think it's a really overlooked category. Again, we love our retail businesses, but I think you have to at least look to see if you can save a substantial amount of money, make more money on your investment, make a greater ROI with a service business. Okay. So, some of the obstacles that people run into when they're looking at, what's my best option is they lead with emotion. They lead with a passion for a product or service. And a lot of times it's about some food item. But the problem is that your skills, the time that you have to put into the business and the amount of money that it takes and produces may not be a good fit for you. Um, um, think of this like an investor would think about what is the best use of my money in addition to my time. And successful franchisees, the people who have opened up multiple locations or multiple types of businesses in some cases, they're thinking about goals, they're thinking about demand, they're thinking about opportunity, and hopefully this presentation has gotten you starting to think about those along those lines too, if you haven't been already. Um, you don't have to have industry experience, so don't start your franchise search thinking, okay, well, I'm a bookkeeper. I'm only going to look at bookkeeping franchises. If you have, I would say at least 10 years of work experience, you probably have, not everybody, but a lot, but most people already have some transferable skills that they can change industries. They can go into a new industry because you're going into business with a franchise that already has the industry experience. That's why you don't need to have the industry experience most of the time. There are some exceptions, but most of the time you don't need it. You do have to have the right skill set though, and you should find a franchise where the top people have a skill set similar to yours. Be careful going into business with a partner because, yes, you are splitting the cost of opening up the business, but you're also splitting the revenue. And you're going to have to be able to agree on things. And a lot of partnerships dissolve, they blow up because partners don't see eye to eye. Um, when you're researching franchises, and you might hire a lawyer to look through your documents. There are franchise lawyers. Don't hire the wrong kind of lawyer. Don't hire your brother-in-law who is a lawyer who represents companies, because they won't know what to look for. They'll ask for unreasonable things. And in some cases, the franchisor said, I'm retracting my offer. I'm not offering you a franchise anymore because we told you hire a franchise lawyer and you didn't do it. So now we think, you might not be a good person to run our business. And also don't have the wrong expectations. The franchise lawyer is not going to be able to change the material terms of the contract. They're not going to give you a special deal just because you happen to hire a lawyer. Everybody's going to have the same kind of arrangement. And then, be careful, like I said before, if you have a day job or if you have other businesses, back to number one here, the skills, the time, and the money must match the franchise that you choose. And so if you don't have enough time alone, even if your skill set matches up, even if you can afford it, if you don't have enough time, you might fail in the business, just because it requires somebody who has more time to devote. And the first 2 years in a franchise, even in the best franchise, even if a franchise has people after 5 years who have been able to cut back their time and now they're only working, 15 hours a month. The first 2 years are not going to be like that. You're going to have to set up a healthy business where you can trust, where you have people on your payroll who you can trust so that you can start stepping away. Um, so the opportunities are businesses that make people more attractive, healthier, feeling better, cost-saving businesses, because this is what businesses need. And again, I'll throw in there business coaching franchises because they need help right. A lot of businesses desperately need help right now. Um, Businesses that serve the aging population, that offer exercise, in-home care, disability access, downsizing help, and relocation help. Businesses that help people in some cases find a safer place to live. That's a thing too. Those are in incredible demand, and there's not enough businesses out there to help all the people who need this kind of help. The franchises that offer a conversion program, there was I think somebody must have written a book about this because not even a couple of years ago, I'm going to say a year ago, all I heard about was entrepreneurship through acquisition. Everybody wanted it. They wanted to acquire a healthy business and make it more profitable. I think most people who went looking for that really didn't find it, because really most of what you're going to see out there is for sale is businesses that are struggling. But some of the franchises have a very sophisticated group of people that will contact businesses that they know are good acquisition targets, and they will help you negotiate a price. They know how to fix the stuff that's broken, and then they're going to help you convert it into the franchise that has all of the vendor relationships, all of the marketing programs that you're going to need to actually make that business more profitable. That's a great opportunity. Businesses that help people sell their homes and move or buy homes and, convert a less expensive home into something that's nice when they don't have the wherewithal to buy a home that's over $1 million, which a lot of homes in the major metropolitan areas are over $1 million right now. So businesses that can help people find a home that has enough space, make it a nice home to live in, or help people sell their homes and move are an incredible opportunity. Um, Franchises that harness AI are a great opportunity as well. I think I ended this a little too early. So, and then, right, so franchises that harness AI and other cutting edge technology, businesses that offer call centers are phenomenal. Call centers don't just free up your time as a business owner, but you have trained people who are talking to somebody who calls in. They know what to say, they know what to ask, and they will literally put appointments on your calendar. So this is somebody who has already said, yes, I'm very interested and I can probably afford it. And you talk to them, it's much easier to convert that person into a customer. And in some cases, a lot of cases actually, the franchises will literally train your employees for you. So it doesn't just, again, free up your time, but they're trained to do things the right way. So you're not having to do it all as the owner of a business. So other things to know, I think going into any new business, but I can definitely to a franchise is a 5-year minimum project. I think if you're thinking I'm going to start a business and only, I'm going to start it, build it, and then I'm going to sell it in 2 or 3 years, I don't think that's enough time to get a franchise to a point where it's going to be appealing to a buyer. I think by 5 years, a lot of these businesses are throwing off a lot of revenue. They've got, a track record where a potential buyer can see that it's pretty consistent. In fact, it's building year after year. But I think you have to be in it and committed for at least 5 years. As I was saying before, the first 2 years is a hustle. Expect to spend more time than in the future in the first couple of years getting it set up to the point where you can start, stepping back a little bit. And then when you are ready to sell, factor in the fact that it could take you up to 2 years to find a buyer. It doesn't always take 2 years. And by the way, established franchises can be bought and sold, and your franchisor might actually be able to find you a buyer. You might not need to hire a business broker at all because a lot of franchises now have resale programs. Wouldn't that be nice if you didn't have to pay 10% of your sale price to a business broker? The franchisor will facilitate the whole transaction and actually bring you a buyer in some cases. But you must understand, the transfer process and requirements and all that. So um, that's about the trends and opportunities and things to look out for. You still need to make sure that going into business through a franchise is the right thing for you. Everybody's attracted to the fact that it's got a proven business model. It might have a familiar brand, that there's all these people, marketing, sales, operations working for you without you having to pay them. Your royalty is what pays their salary. They start up quicker, they're regulated, you have, a whole corporate team that's training you, supporting you, literally doing work for you, without having you have to pay their salary every week. They're regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. Also in Virginia also regulates franchises, makes sure that franchises are every single year they're looked at to make sure that this is not a fly-by-night operation. You still have to be at least somewhat of a system follower, okay? So if you're more like a classic entrepreneur, this is probably not going to be the thing for you. There's still going to be some rules, and then you have to figure out how many rules you really are okay with, because everybody likes the track record of and the history and the stability of a business that's been around for a franchise that's been around for 10 plus years. But the older they get, they tend to have more rules. And so, people who like to listen to somebody else's rules and want to do their own thing, you can't expect to have the same kind of results as the other people that you validated with, who told you, this is a great business and making all kinds of money. If you're following a different business system, you're not going to be able to get the same kind of results. So you have to be a system follower. A lot of franchises give you exclusive rights. We love that. We love exclusive rights where nobody else from the franchise can come in here and do business. But your contract is going to say, if you have exclusive rights, there are some minimum sales goals that you have to meet, because your royalty is usually based on your gross sales. So that's why this process, everything that I'm telling you about, be aware of this, be aware of that, is so important to follow, because you could lose those rights if this is not the right business for you, or if it doesn't match your, skill set, your time availability. If it's too expensive for you and you have to cut back on your marketing, you're not going to have enough customers, and you're going to not be able to hit those sales goals, and you could lose your business. So this is all very important stuff to keep in mind as you make this very important decision. And look, we're here for you. We want to help you through this process. Some people go through this process and they want to, do it on their own. But just you're committing to something, and you should be a goal-oriented person. You're going to have a contract. You can get out of a contract, but it's a hassle, and you might have to pay something to get out of the contract. So again, go about this process very carefully. This could be a wonderful decision that will change your life for the better. But if you miss something, it's going to change your life for the worse. And we don't want that. Okay. So, in terms of transferable business skills, there's a different business for people with a different set of skills. If you come from a sales background or a fundraising background, they're actually very similar. There's a certain type of business that you should be looking at, versus if you didn't do any sales. If you have management experience, there are certain kinds of businesses you should be looking at. And if you liked management, because some people take management positions just because that's the next way to move up in your company and make more money, but they didn't really like managing people. So just different businesses for people who have different skill sets and different things that they've enjoyed versus not enjoyed. So marketing background, customer service background, these are all different businesses that you should be looking at. So your short-term strategy is find a business that you can get into where you won't fail. Make sure this is something that you can succeed. And the research that you do, a lot of which is going to be talking to other franchisees, the more people you can talk to, the better your odds are going to be that you're going to be successful in the business. Look for people who are like you, very much like you. The long-term strategy, get into a business where it improves your life, where it improves your financial position. Not every business will. Even if you see the line out the door, that business could be a nightmare for you, and it could be marginally profitable. Lots of food businesses have a razor thin profit margin. So, before you dive into a food franchise, a restaurant franchise, which tends to be, a lot of them are 80 to 100 hours a week. So that's a lifestyle. I mean, that's your life. You're not going to do a lot outside of your business. So make sure the business gives you the lifestyle you want and allows you to meet your financial goals. So, long-term strategy, understand why you're doing this. What are you looking for out of a business? The product or service come last. But if you're looking for freedom, recognition, achievement, control, more money, what do you value the most? Look for a franchise where it has given other people exactly that. And then, of course, your exit strategy is to build an asset. Wouldn't it be nice if you could build an asset, either pass it on to kids, sell the business, or like I said before, this is your retirement. You're never gonna, a lot of people right now don't retire. It's pretty it's a lot more fun to retire if it's your own business that you're working in versus having to work for someone else and deal with age discrimination and deal with, having to learn something that, especially in the technology area, that you're just not comfortable with. Retiring as a business owner is a nice way to retire. I will share with you that my father is 84 years old and he is still running businesses. He is the sharpest 84-year-old that I know. It makes him feel like he has a purpose every day. And, he can work more or less, whatever he decides to do. He can go on trips when he wants, but he has something meaningful in his life and he's still earning money even though he doesn't have to. So, I think it's a nice way. If you just want to retire and travel, that's great. But a lot of people, they don't want to be on a cruise ship for the rest of their life once they hit retirement age. Okay. So, but whatever's important to you, literally everybody's different. Think about how you would like to exit the business and what you would like your retirement to be like, and find a business where that's possible. Some franchises you're not, or and businesses generally, you're not going to be able to run it past retirement because there's too much physical activity involved. So figure out, think about what you would like your life to be like, what you'd like your retirement to be like. If you want your kids to just be able to get money out of the business. There are certain businesses that sell for a higher resale value. Other businesses, they don't sell for very much at all, but they produce really good income. It really just depends on what's important to you. And there are thousands out there. So, they're not going to be available. They're not all going to be available near you. There's thousands of options over 120 different industries. Certain types of businesses require a special sort of license that some states make it very hard to get. So you really have to understand your market, your environment, see what you can even open, and then figure out what's going to be the right business for you that will give you that'll allow you to meet your financial and personal goals and will be a good match for your skill set. And there's a big cost range here, okay? I mean, restaurant businesses, as I said, you're talking about a starting cost at about $400,000, and that's for a small footprint Subway. So, there's a big range. There's a lot of things that I think you should really look at that could be a lot less expensive. And there's no relationship between what you spend and what you can earn. So, spend some time paying attention to options. And if you end up with a restaurant or you end up with retail, that's great. But make sure that you've at least looked at the less expensive and potentially more profitable options too, because in some cases, some of these businesses are more profitable too. Here's some books that you can read if you want to just learn more. You're really ready to start a search. But if you think you're, ready to start a search, please reach out. There's a entrepreneur profile assessment that you can take. Go through the assessment, see what it says about you. And if you're really serious about finding something, schedule a call. Like I said, doesn't cost you anything. And I feel like with the help of the SBDC, we can really help you coach you through, handhold you through all of the steps, step by step by step, so that you can see if there's something that makes sense at all for you in the franchise space. And if so, what the best option would actually be for you. Okay, we're experienced here. So I'm going to leave my contact information here. If you want to take the entrepreneur profile, you can scan this, or if you don't do QR scans, just reach out to me and I can help. There's also a webinar evaluation here. And if you just want to, I get on my newsletter list, watch some more webinars because you're not quite ready. You probably want to start a search, by the way, no more than 18 months from when you actually want to be in business. So if this is more of a distant goal, um, keep watching webinars, keep reading about options, what's going on in the industry, keep joining the programs that I do because, like I said, they're different every time until you're within that window. And then when you're within the window, do the assessment and please accept the help that we are offering you here through this process. And that is all I have today, Sheila. Are there any questions that came up out of this program?
We have no questions. That was a
Oh,
lot of information. So
I
I
know
will
it
put
is.
out a call for questions. We do have about 15 minutes. So if there's something on your brain, go ahead and drop it into the Q&A, please, and Heather can answer that for you now. And while we wait a moment, Heather, I'll just ask you, you've given lots of words of wisdom, but can you leave us with maybe one little short, concise tip?
Yeah. Um, there is a lot of activity on LinkedIn right now, with franchises reaching out directly to people, saying, "Hey, we noticed your profile. We think you'd be perfect for that." It's fine to talk to them, but I really encourage you to look at your options because um, that might not be the best franchise in the category. That might be a franchise that requires you to pay more than you would need to pay in order to achieve your goals, or maybe it's not a good fit. The outreach that they're doing is usually through a third party, and they're just hitting everybody. So they didn't actually read your your LinkedIn profile. It's a fishing expedition. And some of the franchises, I mean, especially when they're young, they're not necessarily bad players, but when the franchises are young, they don't necessarily know who they're looking for. They're really just looking for anybody who would get excited by their concept, and they might not even know what a good franchisee looks like. So you might be talking to somebody who is over eager to get you to sign on the dotted line and try to keep the emotion out of it and take a step back. We know what works and what doesn't work and what's new and riskier. I mean, if you go with a younger franchise, there are some people who do it. You just have to know that you must have a much higher tolerance for risk and that you shouldn't probably put your life savings into something that's really young. Because who knows whether that business is even going to be around in a couple of years if it's a really young franchise.
Right. We do have an attendee asking if you can go back to the book slide that you put
Oh,
up.
sure. There it is.
Great, thank you. And we had another question. We are interested in franchising our business. Can you advise us steps to achieve this goal?
You're going to have to go through a franchise lawyer. Like I said, the franchises are regulated. They have to file pretty extensive disclosure documents with the Federal Trade Commission, and also if you want to find franchisees in Virginia or any of the 13 registration states, you have to file there, and you can't do it alone. You need a lawyer who has an expertise in this. I will tell you that when I used to do a program for another organization back in 2018, 2017, when costs were little lower, a franchise lawyer used to tell people if you are hoping to franchise your business, plan to have at least $150,000 to launch that new division of your company because it's going to cost you that. So today it's probably double that.
Thank you. We don't have any other questions at the moment, so last call for questions. We might all get to hop off and have our lunch early. do not see anything else popping in. So, Heather, I want to thank you again for a fabulous webinar. And then I want to thank everyone else who joined us. And remind everyone you're going to receive an email with a link to the recording. If you would like to sign up for upcoming webinars or access recorded webinars, you can visit virginiasbdc.org/training. These resources are designed to be used in collaboration with your local SBDC advisors. You can sign up for a free and confidential session by emailing help@virginiasbdc.org or via our website. And we hope to see you all. I think we'll be back in a couple months with this one. So take care, everyone.